Welcome, fans, to the 61st episode of Changeover Chat, presented by Sportmaster Sports Surfaces. I'm your host, Randy Master. Today's guest is a former professional tennis player who was world number one for 58 weeks and captured 2 French and 2 Australian Open singles titles. After retiring from tennis in 2000, he co-founded Inside Out Sports and Entertainment and was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 2005. Our guest was the United States Davis Cup captain from 2010 to 2018 and currently spends much of his time as a tennis commentator, where he has been on air at Tennis Channel, USA, NBC, TNT, Sky Sports, 7 and 9 Network, and Prime Video UK. I'm assuming that your agent doesn't know the word exclusivity.
No one's exclusive in tennis broadcasting for the most part if you work internationally. It's an alphabet soup just like the rest of the sport.
Yeah, well, I love seeing you all over the world. He's also famous, and he is a fixture at the Australian Open with his post-match interviews, one of which I watched today with Stefanos Tsitsipas, which was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. Maybe we'll talk about that later.
That was wild. The crowd was crazy.
He's a native of Sanford, Florida. Please welcome the man Bud Collins once referred to as King James the First, Jim Courier.
Hey, Randy, good to be with you.
You too. Thanks so much for coming on. So, Jim, let's go back in time a bit. Rumor has it that you trained at the Nick Voluntary Tennis Academy.
I can confirm that, yes.
Yeah, that's been well documented. So I was reading a little bit of Andre's book, Open, your longtime rival, Andre Agassi. He referred to Voluntaries in the book as a glorified prison camp where you half expect to find a guard tower and razor wire. It is a karate kid with rackets, Lord of the Flies with forehands. Now, is that the depiction that you got, Jim? Andre, when he wrote this book, I can't imagine his whole time at Voluntaries felt like a prison camp, but what do you make from those words?
Look, I think it's fair to say that Andre went there against his will, so maybe he felt like he was trying to get out of prison. But I think it's also, if that's the description that you want to use for Nick's, which I wouldn't use, but let's go with it. It's also fair to say that I was trying to break in because I was in a small town and I needed desperately to be with better coaching and competition. So when I got the chance to go to Voluntaries, I jumped at it and I loved being there. I was homesick for the first week or so. Then after that, I was right in the flow. So it's all about the perspective, right? If you are choosing to do something, you're typically going to have a better experience than if you're doing it against your will. And I think it's fair to say that Andre and I had very different views on what Voluntaries was. For him, it probably felt like prison. For me, it just felt like an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very well documented, and it's a story I never like to look back on. You and Nick parted ways when he made a mistake, and he still says he made a mistake when he sat in Andre's box when you guys played at the French Open, and that was kind of it. Now, it seems like you guys have kind of mended that fence over the years.
It's been a long time since Nick and I put that behind us, yeah.
Yeah. And I read a quote from him, and he says, Jim always had a heart that is as big as the outdoors. I'm grateful for his unwavering support for what I do. So he obviously meant a lot to your career, Jim, and that one incident.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when I was able to break into the academy because Nick got on the phone, he cold called us at my house in Dade City, Florida, and offered a scholarship. So, I mean, Nick changed my world. That was a defining moment of my life. And I am now with very clear eyes, extraordinarily grateful. I was then at the time. Obviously, we had a little patchy spell in the middle there, but once I sort of matured as a man, I could look back and see it for what it was, which was an incredibly generous gesture by him to, put me on a path to where I am today.
Yeah. So Roland Garros is obviously where you've had so much success over the years. It's a 40-9 record, 2 consecutive titles in 91 and 92. Now, I know you've talked about this match 400 times, but it's coming up on its 30th anniversary, the 91 final. when you and Andre had that war. So, do you think that gives me an excuse to talk about it with you?
You can ask anything you want. I'm fairly open about all this stuff, but yeah, it's interesting that it's 30 years this
Yeah.
year. Time goes quickly, and it's a great memory for me. And that was another sort of seminal moment in my life that changed the arc of what my life is today.
Yeah. So Andre goes up 6-3. He's up a break in the second. I watched this match today again. I couldn't stop watching. I hadn't watched it, I don't think, since it was live. But then you go into the locker room,
Yeah.
and at that point, and it's interesting, Jim. It reminded me a little bit of Andre years and years later in '99 when there was
Mhm.
that rain delay with Medvedev.
Yeah.
He went in the locker room, and tell me if you can compare him or not. He went into that locker room. He was getting beat up by Medvedev. Brad
Mhm.
Gilbert goes in there and basically reads in the riot act. Andre comes back and wins. Now, you went in there down 6-3, 3-1 with Jose Higueras. He seems
Mhm.
a little bit more laid back than than Gilbert, but
Slightly different personalities.
but he must have told you some things that got you back into that match.
Yeah, well, the main thing that Jose did was give me a big tactical change because I was returning short on his serve, and he was the serve plus one. He was just killing me with the
Yeah.
first ball after his serve, hitting winner after winner, or beating me with that shot. So Jose said, you got to back up, give yourself more space to return serve, and try and start the point on even terms. And I was able to do that, and that really changed my ability to get into rallies on
Right.
his serve,
Right.
and that changed the tenor of the match in a hurry.
Yeah. And so you do change the tenor. You get to a fifth set. I didn't realize it, Jim. The winds were swirling
Mhm.
that day, big time. The shadows started to roll in. It was Jimmy Connors, Dick Enberg, and Bud Collins. It was so much fun. Obviously, two of them have passed away. God rest their souls. But
Yeah, and by the way, and let me interject.
sure.
Jimmy was doing the broadcast there. I'd play him in the semifinals of the U.S. Open that summer later.
Oh in that
Same year.
famous that
Yeah,
famous run. So he got a good look at you that day
yeah.
on on a different surface. I hadn't thought of that because I don't see Jimmy in the booth that much, but he was calling that match. So the winds are swirling and there's shadows that are coming in because it's late in the day. So you're up 4-3 serving. I think you probably remember this point. It's 15-40. You get a sitter on top of the net and kind of shank it, or you just didn't hit it solid. Andre
Yeah.
throws it back up, and then you hit some sort of. It was a weird shot. It was some sort of you lean back and you kind of hit a kind of cut an overhead drop shot for a winner. Do you
I
remember
made
that?
it. I know. I remembered. I dropped my serve in that game. I remember that. I just don't remember that particular. I haven't watched the match either.
Oh, okay. Well, that was you saved the break point
Got
there.
it. I'd end up losing my serve there, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So
breaking right back.
so if you don't remember the point, the question isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. But after that point, after you hit that weird winner, you were smiling going back. I think you turned around and looked at Andre to see if he was smiling.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think he was. But it seemed like you were having a good time. Were you loose at that point in the match?
No, I was anything but I was trying to get myself loose with those kinds of reactions to defuse the high stakes.
Yeah,
That's what I was doing.
yeah,
The only real point that I've seen a bunch from that match is the match point, because occasionally it gets replayed. If I'm on air, the producers might sneak up on me and show it. And like
yeah,
the match point, I'm incredibly loose and relaxed and smiling, and I was anything but. I was freaking out.
yeah.
I knew what it meant, but that was my tactic to try and make myself as comfortable as possible in an unfamiliar position.
Yeah, and it happened. It happened in the game where you served for the match. And again, I was watching it. I was watching it today. That last fifth set, and you were kind of talking to yourself before that last game. Do you remember what you were saying? I think what you said after the match when Bud Collins interviewed you was you were saying, "I'm just going to play this game like it's the first game of the match." Do you remember saying
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah. That was a tactic that I used to try and diffuse pressure. I would just try and convince myself that I was playing the first game of the match, and I just needed to hit shots and execute shots and not think about outcome, which was something that I worked a lot on with people like Jim Lair over the years, just to try and manage those pressure situations. So that was very much the case there.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of people on the show. I've been fortunate to have a lot of great guests. James Blake was with me
Mhm.
earlier this week, and we talked about a situation. It's not apples to apples, but he was 6-all in the fifth at the U.S. Open with Andre. A match that got away from James a bit, and they were getting ready to go in this tiebreaker. Great match. I don't know if you remember it, but
I do.
James kind of looked up in the stands, and all of a sudden, this big smile comes across his face, and he told me in the interview, he was like, "Randy, this is what I play for. That's why I was smiling." But it was such a pressure situation. I talked to Marion Vida. Uh, Novak down 2 match points to Roger at the U.S. Open tried to like get the crowd going after he hit a big winner,
Mhm.
smiling. I guess the point I'm trying to make, Jim, is do you think exactly what you said? Do you think players kind of put on this kind of happy face, start laughing just to release some tension? Because it happens a lot in very big moments.
Yeah, everyone is feeling the same pressure. It's always the same. You're playing for something that you care greatly about, and how do you manage that situation? And everyone has different triggers that help them get through it. And that is one of the triggers that you do see from time to time, as players try and play it down a little bit. You just sort of,
Yeah,
it's not, try and make it seem like it's not as big of a deal as it is. Of course, it's a big deal. It's what you committed your life's energy towards at that point in your life.
yeah. So you beat Andre in '91. You end up repeating there at Roland Garros in '92. Your career really takes off from there, Jim. I was kind of looking at the grid. You become number one in the world. 62 and 8 in slams over '91, '92, and '93. So the greatness and the resume we're building at
That was
that
my peak.
time. And now, as I think about what you do today on air, you have a perspective as an analyst that not a whole lot of people have, as far as players that have won this many slams and are really good in the booth. You're one of the top analysts, and I've had so many people, again, that have been on the show, whether it's a Mary Carrillo or a Bill McEntee or an analyst like you, like a PMAC. I guess the question is what. First of all, there aren't a lot of jobs like this in tennis, and relative to a football or a basketball, where there
Sure.
are a lot more on-air jobs. What
Yeah.
what really made you think that um, beyond your expertise that you could get on the air and really articulate what you see on that court, which is a perspective that not a lot of people
Yeah.
have?
Yeah, well, I mean, initially it was probably just not knowing what I didn't know. I started very early after I retired from the ATP Tour. I was quickly in the booth. I was given a great opportunity by TNT to do Wimbledon as their main analyst with no experience, which was
Yeah,
a real risk on their part. But they paired me with some great people. We had Ernie Johnson, who was hosting the desk. Mary Carrillo was a part of that team. Barry McKay was a part of that team. My main play-by-play partner, believe it or not, was Marv Albert, who did 3 years of Wimbledon for TNT. So I was just surrounded by people who weren't going to let me fail,
right.
and they were just amazing. So I had a real cushy entry into it, and it seemed to go well, and I just kind of took it from there. And a little bit of ignorance is bliss. I just kind of went with what I knew early on, which is all the players, you've played all the players, all the coaches and trainers and everything else. So you're just talking shop. And as you get further away from the tour, which I'm pretty far away from it these days from my playing days,
Yeah,
you have to do a little bit more work, a little more research. But I think um, I've developed a style that I'm very comfortable with as far as analyzing matches and trying to try and show people something they can't see. And I think I always knew that they had information that would be hard to replicate because I'd played in all the high pressure moments
yeah,
and won some and lost some. So I sort of felt everything that the players were feeling. I
yeah.
knew tactics. I knew the personalities. So I thought I had a pretty good edge there. And so far, I'm still doing it, and I have a great time doing it. I just got off the air a couple hours ago from calling the Djokovic Tsitsipas match, which got suspended in Rome. But it's a blast to be able to watch these great athletes do what they do and try and help the viewers understand a little bit more about the game, hopefully.
Yeah. Do you have more fun when you do the on court interviews in
Oh God, no.
Melbourne.
Oh God, no. I hate those things.
It's Jim.
They're a
It's
pure
such good
exercise.
stuff. Sometimes
They're,
I want the match to end to see you or Mac do those interviews.
it's a sheer exercise in terror, Randy. You're going out there live in front of most years a big audience and then a television audience to boot. And the players they have to answer your questions, but they don't have to be polite about it, but they usually are. But it's a performance without a net out there, and you hope that you don't get too much egg on your face.
Yeah.
So I'm always extraordinarily terrorized prior to going out and doing that stuff. And thankfully, the players tend to take care of me when I'm out there, and they answer the easy questions I throw at them with aplomb.
Yeah. Well, if anybody hasn't seen Jim and Stefanos at the Australian Open this year, go check that one out. That's it's hard to describe. So
Well, I can describe it for you. He played a great match. I asked him very innocuous questions. He answered them very definitively and accurately. And maybe it's because of a language issue. It didn't have a ton of modesty in the answers, but it's nothing that Federer hasn't said a million times in those interviews as well. It's just, yeah, I played great. I'm not sure what his strategy was, but I had mine. And the crowd started booing and getting on him. And it just it turned very awkward very early. And yeah, I'm not sure I recommend anyone watching it necessarily. It still gives me a little weird feeling thinking about it, because I don't want to make the players feel weird out there. I want to help them shine and let the fans know more about them.
Yeah, well, they're fun to watch. And moving from Australia to a place you're going to be in about 2 weeks is Roland Garros. I'm assuming the whole Tennis Channel team is
We're
heading over there.
Yeah.
I want to start with the men, because I don't think there are as many compelling stories, even though there may be somewhat of a compelling story. But come on, there's a little guy named Rafael Nadal. 13 titles there, going for 14. I haven't spoken, Jim, to a single person on this show that sits in seats like you do.
Yeah.
Renee Stubbs, probably the last. James, they're all like, it's a foregone conclusion, even though he hasn't been that strong. I don't know what you would call not that strong for Rafa during this season, but they all just think it's 14. Just put in the books. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's as close to a foregone conclusion as I think you can have in tennis, but nothing is really foregone. But my view is there are very few people that can challenge him. Novak Djokovic at his top level, top gear, against Nadal in his top gear on that court, Novak has beaten him. So he's one person that can feel that way. Dominic Thiem's a little bit at sea right now. He's not beaten Rafa at Roland Garros, but he's just a little bit trying to find his footing again after taking a mini sabbatical. And then it's hard for me to find anyone else that might be able to do it, unless I'm actually really curious. Tomorrow, we're taping this, it's on Friday, and tomorrow, Saturday, Rafa is going to play in the semis of Rome against Riley Opelka.
Yeah.
Now, he's never played Opelka, and Opelka doesn't let his opponents play. And Isner, who plays a similar style to Riley, took Rafa to 5 sets at Roland Garros years ago. Didn't win, but he took him to 5. So, and he's one of the few to ever do that. So, it's that kind of asymmetrical game that might cause like the crazy upset like Soderling had with Nadal, but it's just hard to imagine. It just is hard to imagine. It's a very low probability.
And what about the guys like Rublev, Berrettini? You think those are more guys that'll compete next couple of years? They're certainly great players, top 5, top 10 players.
I think those are guys that could make the semis or the finals as long as they're not in Rafa's section.
Yeah.
They're that good.
Yeah. Well, while we're on the American male topic, James and I spoke, I don't know, probably 15, 20 minutes about American tennis yesterday, just with the preface that we woke up on Monday morning and there wasn't a single American player in the top 30, and that was since they actually had the rankings in 1973. It's a half a century. So, but at the same time, we're both Americans, and you're an American, and we didn't want to be negative about it. We just were trying to figure out what is going to turn the tide. Obviously, Riley getting to the semis in Rome, let's get excited about it.
Yeah, well, he's knocking on the door of top 30. If he beats Nadal and makes the finals, he'll be in the top 30, and he'll supplant Taylor Fritz as the number one American on Monday.
Yeah,
So that's a big if, and highly unlikely given Nadal's history. But he's going to be close to it, and if Riley's healthy, he'll be top 30 in no time. And I think Taylor, come grass and hard court season, I think he'll accelerate as well. But sure, the question, there's a lot of words that have been spoken and
yeah,
ink spilled already on the top 30 aspect. For me, I've been a part of that because on Tennis Channel Live, we had to have that discussion with Andy Roddick and myself and Steve Weissman or Noah.
yeah,
The point is, are they doing as well as they should be doing? That's the question. Are they maximizing what they have? And Isner certainly has for a long, long time. And if he is healthy and plays a full schedule, he'll be top 20, no doubt. He has been for a decade.
yeah,
The other guys, I think, are closer probably to maximizing their potential right now, but they should be. We should have at least one or two of those young guys in the top 30.
yeah,
Again, if we get conditions normalized and the rankings are easier to move one way or the other when not this jumbled system that they're
yeah,
using to protect players in COVID.
yeah,
So we'll get back there. It's a blip. We've got 10 guys or so in the top 100 right now.
yeah.
We'll find some guys up closer to the top before too long.
Yeah, well, it'll be great to see. The women in Paris are going to be a little bit tougher to predict. Again, going back to my conversation with Stubbsy, who's never at a loss for words, she said, Randy, there are 14 to 16 women that could win this thing. And I looked at her and I'm like, maybe that seems like a high number. But then she got into some of the names. And, if you want to start, we started with obviously Serena. Now, Jim, I want to hear your thoughts on what Stubbsy said. She, and I don't know the exact quote, but she said that Serena does not put as much emphasis now on number 24. It's not going to define her. She has her family. She might retire at the end of the year. Yeah, she's going to do everything she can to try to win the French. Wimbledon's probably her best shot, U.S. Open. But it's not going to define her, according to Stubbsy, and she's okay walking away without hitting 24. Do you think that? But she was just speculating. She hadn't.
Yeah, no, listen, Serena will do what Serena does, and she has the right to walk away whenever she wants and stay as long as she wants. We hope she stays as long as she can. It's awesome to see her competing as well as she did in Australia this year. She looked fast and fit and played well and just ran into a buzzsaw in Osaka. So her tennis level is there. That I think to answer your question on Stubbsy's thought specifically about whether Serena is as invested in 24 as she was before, I don't think we can possibly know that until she gets to another major final and see how she plays, because the four times that she's played for 24 since she came back from giving birth to Olympia, she's been understandably very anxious and hasn't played as well in those finals as she did in the matches to get to the final. So, hoping that she can play that same level the next time she gets to a major final. And that might be an indication that she's sort of let go of that in a way. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, she's understandably very, very guarded about, giving away exactly what's going on. And that's hopefully at some point in time, she'll write a book with the same author, J.R. Moringer, who ghost writ Andre's book Open.
Yeah.
He just did an amazing job, crafting Andre's story and using his words. And Serena's story is so compelling. If she could do something like that, it'd give us a lot more insight into her and, her amazing career that's still ongoing. And again, I hope it doesn't stop soon.
No, neither do I. And Stubbsy didn't either. I mean, Stubbsy was like, I am praying for her to beat Margaret Court's record, which she doesn't even think is legitimate.
It's not the record. It's not the record.
Well,
Steffi has the record. Apples.
Yeah, that's exactly what she said.
And
Steffi has it at 21. Staying on the American women now, this is a very positive. This is a very positive trend in the country right now on the U.S. side. I was looking at the players, and I'm not going to ask you to pick a winner of the tournament, Jim, unless you want to. But on the American side, we've got Jen Brady, we've got Jess Pegula, we've got Coco Gauff, we've got Sonia Kennan, Sloane, Madison.
Mm-hmm.
Any of those?
Yeah.
Which one can which one can make a deep run into the second week of that group? And maybe I left a few
I
out.
mean, what about Jessie Pegula, who's just having an
Yeah,
incredible year, right?
yeah,
I mean, she's just so consistent and so difficult to beat. Obviously, draw matters a lot, and we'll see how that all shakes out. But um, look, Coco's in the semis in Italy. She got
yeah,
the walkover today, which was a bit fortunate for her. But that's going to put her in the top 30 prior to
yeah,
Roland Garros, so she'll be seeded, which will be big for her. So we
yeah,
know Coco has big upside. I really hope that Sonia Kennan can get in gear. She's in a tough place right
yeah,
now, separating from her father as coach.
yeah.
That's a tricky moment in her life. I hope she can have a positive result. But you never know. I mean, like Sloane is the outlier for me because she can go from losing 5 first rounds in a row to winning Roland Garros. She's that good, and when she's in the mood, she's that tough to beat, and she's an amazing defender. So it's so fun to actually speculate because there's so many different options. You know, Jim Brady, who saw that run coming in Australia when she was quarantined for 14 days and couldn't
Yeah.
practice, and then she makes a run like that, beating
Yeah.
Jack on the way to reach the finals. So speculating is fun. It has no bearing, obviously, on what happens. I love to watch. I much prefer that than to making predictions. I'm much better at telling you why something has happened or is happening
Right,
than
right. Well,
predicting what is going to happen.
yeah, I'll just get your opinion on a couple of players. You don't even have to tell me how far you think they'll go in Australia. Sabalenka has been, she's moving up. She could be a number one player in the world at some point. She is so strong and confident, and
Yeah.
you see her as a contender, even though you don't want to
Yeah,
predict.
yeah, look, the game's there. It's the unknown. How does she respond to Grand Slam final pressure if she gets there? That's the great unknown.
Yeah.
But her form and confidence is as good as it's ever been. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and just quickly, do you know how Ash Barty is doing? She had all
So
kinds of tape in
So
her
she
arm.
had to retire today against Coco when
Yeah,
she won her set, but mid-match because she had some right elbow trouble, and she says that she's been dealing with this since she was a teen. She knows how to manage it, so she pulled the ripcord today against Coco because she knew that she needed to stop, making the pain worse, and that she would have a couple of weeks to get it right for Roland Garros. So it sounds to me, based on her post-match interview, that she's confident she's going to be okay for Roland Garros, and she'll be
okay.
one of the favorites for sure.
Yeah, certainly. So finally, Jim, first I wanted to. I'm a collector, as you can see. I don't throw much out back here.
Like that.
I found this baby.
Oh, the pro staff, that thing is
Yeah,
gold. You
and
put that thing on eBay, and Stefan Edberg, Pete Sampras, and I would have had a bidding war for that in 90.
one thing, it's pretty loose. The grip is huge. It's like
Yeah,
a
is that one of those sweet fairway grips?
it's a fairway. Yeah, it's like a
Yes.
five. It's like a 5.8. And I was gonna go hit with my son with this thing, but I don't know. It's like
85 square inches. That thing's like a little pea shooter compared to what we have today. But that racket was an amazing one. I switched to that racket I think it first came out when I was around 13 or 14 years old. So I switched from the Wilson Ultra to the pro staff. It was
yeah.
awesome.
And the last thing I wanted to say, got a little nostalgic. Steve Flink and I talk all the time. He's been on this show. I just wanted a couple of words. He's such an expert on. I read his book about Pete, and you're all over that in a good way. He said no one was more professional than Jim. He was an essential member of the so-called greatest generation with Pete, Andre, and Michael. He gave the game absolutely everything he had and established himself as a player of long-lasting importance. And Jim, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I admit it. I think you and I are about the same age. So I've always been a huge fan, and the way you've carried yourself on and off the court is admirable. And
Yeah, well, thank you. That means a lot to me, and Steve's words do too. He's the preeminent historian right now. I think of our sport in America. Certainly, he's kind of he's taken the reins from Bud since Bud passed on. So it means a lot to me that I just love being a part of the tennis world. It's just a real treat. So and I'm still doing it at 50 years old, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, well, I'm 51, so
I'm not far behind you. I'll be there in August.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, Jim, thanks so much for this, and I'll be looking for you this weekend, and definitely watching the French.
All right, me too. I'll be there watching it just as close. Good to see you, Randy. Take care,
All right,
buddy.
you too. Thanks.
All right, bye for now.
Bye. Bye-bye.